Power BI health check and administration. It was really insightful to me as well, especially since I'm not usually in this particular area of Power BI. So thanks. And with that, let's go to the next session. So this one will be about some new additions to Power BI that are being developed by Microsoft recently, namely two new visuals. That is the new card and new slicer visual. Those are both the core Power BI visuals, so not something that you are expected to download from the app source, but they are available by default. So they are actually the core Power BI visuals, if you will to call them that way, actually. So before we jump into that, let me actually quickly reintroduce myself, in case someone has joined now. So my name is Greg. I work for a consulting company called Kearney. I'm a senior BI developer there, specializing mainly in Power BI, but also SQL and Azure. You can find me on my YouTube channel. There is a nice video about some common Power BI questions during interviews. So if you want to ace your Power BI role interview, feel free to check that out. It's at Greg Works Power BI, my YouTube channel. And you can also connect with me through my LinkedIn account and Sessionize account. Here are the links. If you can more or less get my surname correctly in, then you will be able surely to find me there. Okay, with that in mind, let's see what do we have in the agenda for this session. So first, we'll have some theoretical introduction for just a couple of minutes. And we will cover the basics of the new slicer visual, the button slicer. I will tell why just the button for now. Then we will cover the new code visual principles and theory quickly. And the lion's share of this session will be the live demos. So we will be building something Power BI. I will be also showing you how you can quickly get some value delivered using these visuals, how you can quickly set up some very visually appealing results, what you can do with both of these visuals, and also what is possible if you invest a bit more time customizing both of these visuals, because the results are also great and they are quite reusable. So I think that's helpful. Cool. So after this session, you should be able to first know what's the difference between the old visuals and the new ones, since both the card visual and the slicer visual already exist in Power BI. Those that we cover today are just the new versions. So how are they better? When should you use them? What can you accomplish using them? That's the first key learning takeaway for today. And during my previous session 2 hours ago, I've seen this question: what's the difference between the new and old card visual? That's one of the key points in the agenda of this session, so it will get covered soon. Next, the second key learning point is that you should be able to identify basically when to use the new visuals over the old ones, and when this will bring tangible results to your report, to your dashboard. When will this yield in good results? And the last thing from the technical part is that you should basically be able to start using the new card and slicer visual from right after this session, starting from tomorrow. So you should be able, after the demo, to develop something like this, something tangible yourself. So we will just cover the settings, what's included in both the card and slicer visuals, so that you can basically leverage that knowledge from literally from the next day. So with that in mind, let's get to the first point in the agenda. So the theory about the new button slicer visual. So this might be a familiar view on the left-hand side to you. The old slicer visual. I'm talking about the default slicer visual. It's been in Power BI for over 10 years, from basically the start. So this is how it looks. Well, to a certain degree, that looks pretty neat, minimalistic, you could say. But there are some challenges with this design. It's pretty limited in terms of customization. So, for example, the 2012 year is selected right now. And one fun fact about this old button slicer visual is that you cannot change the background color of the selected tile. So if instead of black, 2012 tile or island or however you would call it, I would like to have it in blue, like on the right-hand side. That was not possible, unfortunately. If I would also like, instead of rectangles as those tiles, I would like to have rounded rectangles, some ellipses, circles, or any other shape, a trapeze maybe, for a nice bookmark. That also wasn't possible yet with this visual. So it was kind of limited in terms of personalization, in terms of how visually appealing and nice, basically, it was. And this basically made it quite difficult to blend such a visual into certain reports for certain clients or your company. If you had a defined color scheme, like a visual template, a theme for your company, if this black color didn't fit in, well, that's too bad. It had to stay there. Or you could also use other button slicers, but with this one, well, it's a no-go. You just couldn't customize it anymore. Now, moving to the right-hand side, this is the new button slicer visual and a quick example that we will create during this session as well. So this is like a rounded rectangle that already looks a bit more modern to me and more contemporary. To me, this design is much nicer and pleasing to the eye. You can customize it a lot more and have like a much more modern design, basically. Also, it is possible to customize a ton of features about this design that we will cover, like the shape, the colors, basically everything. And there are also some extra features that are a bit hidden beneath the surface, but I will show them to you as well. So what's there to remember about the new slicer? Here is a slide with the development timeline for the new visual, for the new slicer visual. So here we have said that currently only the button slicer is released. That's why I am calling it the button slicer all the time, because the built-in slicer visual has a bit more settings. You can have it in a bit more options, like you can have the drop down, you can have the list, you can have the button slicer, so the tiles, what we are covering, but you can also have like a slider or the calendar slicer. That's all to come for the new slicer visual. At this point in time, only the button slicer is released, so what we are covering today. But Microsoft plans to actually implement the list and drop-down slicer, the slider, and the calendar and relative slicer as well moving forward. And the timeline is not known at this moment in time, but it can come any minute. They are planning to do it anyway. Still, the new slicer visual, same as the card visual, they are both in preview modes at this point in time. So it's not general availability. What does this mean to you? The preview mode is basically a trial period for testing the new functionalities of Power BI. So there are some bugs to be expected. I haven't faced many for a couple of months, but when I first touched these two features, there were some bugs and I couldn't like change the font of one of the elements, the font size. So still there is a chance that you will encounter some bugs that are not, that you cannot work around at this point in time. Just keep this in mind that not everything might work exactly as you expect during the preview time of these features. Cool, and now let's go to the new card visual. So on the left-hand side is the old card visual, the most basic, the default one that pops out when you create a new card, the old card visual, the classic one. We could say about it that it's maybe minimalistic as well. It's simple. If that works for you, then great. But it has quite limited customization options as well. Like, for example, for the data label here, the 2.64 billion, you weren't really able to align that to the left or right. That wasn't possible yet. Or if you would like to have this category label that's sales at this point, like above the data label, so here, that wasn't possible as well. While now the new card visual that's on the right-hand side actually can do all of these things that I've just named. And also, this whole visual on the right-hand side, this is just a single visual element still. So you can see that the new card visual actually has a much more customization options in terms of just the visual part, but it also has some extra features. You can put some extra stuff in there. This is still one visual element, even though it has a number of individual components. So we have the title of our card, the sales. We have the data label, the main one. We also have this nice icon that you can put inside. And we have some additional data that's called reference labels beneath on another background, so as to make it stand out a bit more. And this is some data that we can put additionally inside this card just to enable our users to have a bit more insight into what they are actually looking at. So, okay, we have the sales 2.64 billion, but is that good? Is that bad? Are we doing, are we under our target, or are we actually 20% above our target? Is that good versus the previous year? Are we actually decreasing or increasing our business? Well, with this, you can have some additions. So we can say that, yeah, for example, the target is for 3.45 billion. So we are actually 24% behind it. And last year, the sales also was higher. So this year, we are quite underperforming at this time. So the point to remember from here is that this is still one visual element, which is great. During my adventure and endeavor in Power BI in consulting, I have actually created such infographics, let's call this whole element an infographic for a while, using individual elements like the card visual. So, for example, this label 2.64 billion would be one element. The icon would be another visual element, like a picture inserted inside. Here we would also have at least 2 additional elements with the target and sales last year, then the whole background. So just counting it very quickly, such an infographic would be maybe 8 to 10 individual visual elements. And of course, in your Power BI report, you wouldn't have just like one of these infographics in the top row or maybe on the left-hand side in a column. You would usually have more towards 3, 4, like, you know, sales, the cost, maybe the target, the profit or something like that, the marketing cost for a sales report. So to start with, you would have like 4 infographics times 10 elements to render for Power BI, which already makes it a bit slow to just react to the user selections, to some filters and so on. So your user might need to wait a couple of seconds for the report to load just because we have created a number of such infographics and it takes a few seconds to render all of them. Now, having all this in one element already significantly makes your report faster because this is one element, but that's not all. If you have multiple infographics like this, you can also put them still not as individual new card visuals, but they can all be in one. Why? Because actually the new card visual timeline already has the multi-card released as well. So if you recall what's available in Power BI, what was there for a long time, there was this card visual, the normal one, and there was the multi-row card visual. So with the new card visual, actually, the multi-row card is included as well. So you can have multiple KPIs like this sales that I have shown you. You can have the profit, you can have the cost, and they will all still be in one visual element, which is great because instead of 40, 50 individual elements to render, Power BI has just one, which will yield great results in terms of optimization and rendering time for your visuals. So as this is a preview feature as well, just as the slicer visual, we have some roadmap from Microsoft of the development time. The times are, again, not published yet, but we have the multi-card released and we have the reference labels released as well. The reference labels are those here at the very bottom, this target and sales last year in this example. What Microsoft plans to do with this more? Well, they plan to add the small multiples, actions, and trends. We'll see how it goes. For now, we don't know when this will be released. Okay. So with that, let's actually get into the live demos and see some examples in Power BI. Cool. So I have my Power BI open here. And I will show you a couple of designs that are relatively quick to make. First, we will make them together that you can just implement in your reports from the next day. And I will also show you some visuals that take a bit more time to create, but they are really a great improvement as well, and a great feature to include in your reports if the investment of time is worth for you. But before we get into that, let's actually see where do we have our new card and slicer visuals. So I have them right here in the visualizations pane, in the part where they are the core Power BI visuals are included. So these icons look very similar to the icons of the old card and slicer visuals. They just have a little lightning in the top left corner. So they are the built-in visuals as well. But if you don't see them at the first time you open Power BI, well, then you might need to enable them. Let me quickly show you how. They are preview features, as I mentioned before. So you might need to enable them as a standard preview, as normally with the preview features. So to do that, you go to File, then you go to Options and Settings, Options again. And now in the global part, there will be something that's called preview features. If you go to the very bottom, then the new card visual and the button slicer visual will be one next to the other, somewhere in the middle. I can see them here, but if you have an older version of Power BI Desktop than me or a newer one, they might be located in a slightly different place, but definitely they will be in the preview features. If you can't see the new card visual and button slicer visual toggles here, then it is likely that your version of Power BI might be like a year old or so on, because the first time that these were added, the new card visuals, was around June, I think, or so last year, more or less. Okay, if you enable these two, you click OK and restart your Power BI desktop, then you should see the icons in the visualizations pane. And okay, let's get started. Let's get to visualization. So we will be building a year toggle, just as before we did. So let me just maybe turn off the interactions because it will be getting in our way. And okay, this is the old button slicer. So yeah, basically this is it. We can not tailor it much more. Let's change the type to the new slicer visual. And this is what we have in the first place. So it looks pretty the same, I would say. Maybe let me put one next to the other. It's not super visually appealing at the first place, honestly, at the first glance, but let's see if we can make it better. So you have a couple of settings to play with. First, you have the slicer settings. So you can, of course, enable the single select option if you would like. That's supported. One option that went missing is this multi-select with control, which was available in the previous slicer, this one. It's no longer there for the new slicer visual. Microsoft commented that it wasn't maybe very intuitive, so they have just removed it. And another feature that might be helpful at certain occasions is the forced selection option that appears available when you enable the single select. This is an option that is also helpful in certain advanced scenarios where you need to sync some slicers and do some tricks to enable the right experience for your users. And it was also available, the first selection feature, in another slicer by Microsoft that's called Chiclet Slicer. This is also actually completely replaced by the new slicer visual, so I will not be covering it. But if you have used the Chiclet Slicer visual for the first selection option, then please be informed that this is also available in the new slicer, the button slicer visual. Okay, I will just set it to multi-select, and okay, let's go further. Next, in the shape area, you can customize the shape. So the rectangle was what we had previously. Now we can also have the rounded rectangle and play with the rounded corners a bit. And we can also have something that's called snippet tab, both top. So it's like a trapeze, really. Let me just get back to it. And you can also just snip individual corners like this. So if you would like to have something that looks like a bookmark for your book, for example, that's also possible. So if you want to go for something like a trapeze, then this is your go-to option. I will actually stick to the rounded rectangle to build the example that we've seen in the slide deck. And I will say that rounded corners, we want to have it around 10. Cool. Now for the layout, we can customize that as well. So for example, we can have a grid, and let me force that now. So we can have multiple options like this, for example. We can have a single column, so all in one column, all our tiles, or a single row, so what we had previously. If I would now say that, hey, I've got maybe not years in this slicer, but like product brands, and then it's likely that we will have not 3 brands in our report, but 100. And for the tile slicer, well, that's already a lot to fit into a relatively small area that this slicer will occupy. So we have some ways to work around that. For example, let me show you this. I've set up the slicer to only show 1 row at a time and 2 columns. So 1 year doesn't actually fit in the canvas anymore. What can we do with it? There's a nice feature that's called overflow now that we can customize actually. And you can either have the continuous scroll, either vertical like right now, or horizontal. So something like that, to fit the extra number of tiles in your slicer, or you can have the paginated option like this, so on individual pages. And the paginated option was also available in the previous slicer. But let me actually, for now, revert to the single row. Let's say that I like this design. Let's stick to it. And now let's see what's in the next menu, the callout values. So the callout values in the language of this new slicer are the individual data categories that we are filtering. So years in this example, like 2011, 12, and 13. And we can customize it, as you can see here. If you use the new bookmark navigator or page navigator, that's something similar. You can customize the font, the font family, the color and size per each individual state. So you can have a different color or font when a certain tile is not selected and when it's selected, like black and white. And you can also have a different one when we are just hovering over it. But for now, let's just increase the slicer, the font size. Whatever you do in the default option, it will automatically propagate to all the other ones as well. You can see that. But if we start customizing just the options that are selected, press and hover, then they will stick to just these ones. And I also maybe want to align our values centrally, so something like that. Okay, let's say we like that. And the next thing that we might want to do is to change maybe the color of the selected tile, so to build something visually appealing. Yeah, that's white for now. Maybe let's make it a bit bolder so that it stands out a bit, maybe a bit bigger also. Okay, that's it when it comes to the callout values. The images we will cover in around 5 to 10 minutes, but let's see the buttons now. So the button is everything that's in this new slicer that's not the value itself, so the 2012, and that's not the shape. So it's, for example, the background image or the color that we see here and the border. So for the default option, maybe let's keep it like it is. But for the selected option, I would like to choose another color. Maybe let it be some kind of blue. Yeah, something like that. And let's maybe add a bit of transparency to the border. Okay, and for the fill color, let's do the same, but make it just a bit more transparent. Yeah, maybe something like that. That's around what we had in the slide. And well, now this is already a simple and quick to do yet powerful design that looks much better than the old one to me. And you can put any color, any colors in there so that it blends into your report design of your company or your client's company. Why not? Let's also add like this hover option. So we will have it like that, so that when we are hovering over it, it also highlights a bit. That looks nice to me. So yeah, that's cool. So that's the first simple but quick design, simple but powerful design that was quick to do. It took like 5-10 minutes. Let's now explore another options that we have available in this slicer visual. So, for example, in the chart that I have below, I could have a tooltip, of course. It can be a report page tooltip, so this custom one. I have something like this, just a pie chart that shows some composition of my sales by channel. Cool, and if you've already looked, you might have seen that in the new slicer visual, we also have the tooltips field. So we can use either the default tooltip, so just an individual measure here, but you can also go ahead to the general options and enable the tooltips. And when you select the report page and your specific page, voila, you can have the tooltip on your slicer. Whatever. So having a tooltip on the slicer is already a great option, which you can use, for example, for allowing your user to get a bit more glance into individual options that you have in the slicer before drilling into there. So if your user is expected to perform some kind of exploratory analysis, then this might already point them to some point of interest to say that, hey, in this year, there is more value, there is more sales than in the previous years, or the one product brand is selling much more than the others. Let's focus on this one to prioritize first. So this already allows your user a bit more context into what are they seeing on the screen, where should they go to look for the information that they are looking for. Okay, so the tooltip is a great addition here. Let's see another one. So I will disable the tooltip for now because it will be popping up all the time. And let's see another thing. So in the colored values now, if we go there is one additional option that I have skipped a few minutes ago. So the labels. And the labels are an additional field that you can put in your slicer now that will also give your users some additional context into what they are actually looking at. So I will enable the labels, and I have a measure prepared already. It's a simple measure that just takes my sales value that's on the chart below, divides it by million, and formats it as millions, and sales and concatenates it with a text that says total sales. So it just says that for a given year, the total sales was 30 billion or something like that. Let's put it in our slicer. And great, that worked. Let me zoom in a bit. So cool. Now we also have one additional pointer for our customer, for our business user, that says immediately to the user that, hey, in this year, in 2011, I have over 3 billion sales. Maybe this is the year that I'm looking for to analyze more, to drill into really, or this is the product category if you would have something like this in our report. So it also gives our user a bit more context into what they are looking at. And since these little labels, the additional data labels are also part of the colored values, we can also customize their state per state of selection of the slicer. So to make a practical example, well, the sales, this label looks pretty nice and readable, legible for the tile when it's not selected, but when it's selected, it doesn't look that good. Maybe we can't read it very easily. So we can actually go to it and change the font color, and voila, the font color of the selected slicer will now also be white, which is very nice. Cool. And now let's go to the last point on the slicer visual. So we've had these images. Let's see that. But for this, I have prepared another demo that we want to actually have countries as our category, and we want to put flags of these countries as the background color. Let's do that now. So first, I will put the countries in the slicer, in my slicer that I have prepared. Okay, we can already delete this one. Let's say that we want to have it as a single row, maybe. Cool. And now, if we go to images, let me maybe zoom in a bit so that you can see it well. You can also apply the images per state, but an important point here is that the image cannot be, for the slicer visual, anything that you upload from your computer. So it cannot be a file, a graphics file from your computer. You have to input web URLs here. And I already have them prepared. I used a web service that's called Worldometers, where there are flags per countries. And I have mapped each of the flags, flag URLs, so the address to the name of the country. So we have like US flag, we have the Norwegian flag with the Polish flag, and so on. And now let me put that inside. Boom, and it worked. We have the flags, as you can see, and we can also have a different selection style of the flag, so that it's like highlights the selected tile when we have one or two selected, so that we see which one did we select actually. If you look very closely, you can see that the flags do not actually align perfectly with the outline of the tile. This is actually one of the points with the preview features. I know that this has been fixed already, but the update with the Power BI update with this correction didn't reach my laptop yet and my company, so this should be fixed really shortly. Okay, so if you want to have like images in the slicer visual, you can have them, but you need to have them as web address, and the web address also needs to be public actually. So you cannot put the images in your SharePoint folder of your company that you need to authenticate to log into. This has to be available via anonymous access. So keep in mind that whatever you put the images, whatever images you put in your Power BI report this way, they will be theoretically accessible to anyone in the world anonymously. So better do not publish some pictures that are maybe confidential or something like that. If you would like to put the images of your coworkers in like a report for your manager, then it might not be the best idea because someone might not agree to have their image published on the web. If you would, on the other hand, like to put like images for a product category, for a product, individual products in such a slicer, then it could already work because if you have the images for your products, then I bet these are already available somewhere in your e-commerce store online or something like that. So that's okay. And now let's go to the new card visual. So this is the old card visual. Let's create a new one by just creating that, this way. So for the new card visual, it also doesn't look very impressive at the very beginning. There are some formatting options just for the slicer visual, which are pretty similar in terms of layout. The colored values, they are really similar. But one of the most important parts is that for the reference labels, you can put some additional data in here. So I had like the sales target inside previously, and we can have that, or we can have the sales last year, for example, so that we add some additional context to our visuals. If we spend a couple more minutes formatting it, we could actually get to nicer results. And since we have 12 minutes left, let me just show you my work that I have done previously for this and guide you through it. So yeah, so this is the reference label. If we spend a bit more time on it, then we can get to something like that. Let me zoom in a bit. So for each of the individual reference labels, which is the target and sales last year, we can define the individual formatting properties as well. Just if we go to select label and we are inside the sales target now, so here we can customize the font, can make it bolder, bigger, whatever. We can also add some additional one more data level that's called detail. And the detail in this example is this +8% plus the arrow. That's also conditionally formatted for a color. So this is an additional data point that you can add and data layer. You can customize it freely as well. And this can give your users some additional context, basically. So we know the sales, okay, we know the target, but we also know visually that, hey, we are green, so we are doing above the target in this example. But for the sales last year, it's not so good, apparently. Cool. And for the multi-row feature, you can have something like that, for example. So this is still one individual visual. I have just put in the data, so not in the reference labels, but in the data, individual metrics. So like sales target, profit, I could have the cost, something like that here as well. And you can format each of these individually. So each of these cards stays separate. You can give them other metrics, other colors. Basically, it's a totally separate entity. Now let's get back to this one. And if we want to push that one step further, we could also upload this image. So the icon here, which looks already a bit nicer to me. To do that, you go to images as well. And for your selected KPIs or sales, in this example, you can just here upload an image. This time, you can actually do it from your computer. So the sales.png is just a file that I have somewhere on my laptop. It's just an icon, this one. But this is not all. You can also use the web URLs here as well, if you would like, if you prefer that. And you can use HTML code with some SVGs, so to draw spark lines. There will be a super short demo in a moment. And now if we would like to, again, consolidate some of the infographics together, so we would like to have in a relatively similar format, the sales, the profit, the cost, and so on, we can do that as well. That works just perfectly. This is something that I have created over half an hour or so. So each of the individual metrics, the sales, cost, and profit here, behaves totally separately. It has different reference labels. So the cost target is a different measure than the sales target, for example. And we can have them visually different so that they stand out from each other. One is blue, one is green, one is yellow, and so on. And this is still one individual visual. So with that, we can save a lot of loading time for the user because it sends a lot of DAX queries, okay, for a number of different KPIs and all the labels. But still, this is one visual, like one visual element. So this is really quick to load. On the contrary, if we would like to have it as individual elements, then it would take probably much more time to create and much more time to load as well. So if that framework, that kind of visual works for your organization, for your client, then I would suggest that you just go with the new card visual and create infographics like this. They already look pretty modern, contemporary, and attractive to me. I hope so they do for you, and they will fit your needs. And of course, I have just 3 cards like this in my report, but if you will, you can have 10 or 5, as many as you want. Okay, and the last part now is something that's a sparkline. So this is a feature that you might have seen in tables, in matrices, and so on. So here I have a little chart inside. This is actually the sales chart, so a miniature version of what we have below. If you look, you can closely, you can see the correlation. So how do we have this done? In the images part, instead of the image itself, so the image from your computer, a file, you can select the image URL, so just an address or HTML code in this example of your visual, of your image that you want to render. And if you select that, you can actually have something drawn dynamically as well. So this is a URL image that I have put inside, and let me show you how it looks. This is a code that I have copied and customized from Kari Kolosko. Here is the address, so kudos to him. And this is basically a code that's pretty lengthy to build this sparkline, but it's really easy to customize. You just put your own measure and your own x-axis in 2 places and it just works. So that's really nice. So this is basically drawn on the go, and you can have a sparkline like this as well. And of course, you can have it for multiple cards too. So there is no reason why not to have an individual sparkline and each one different for each of the KPIs if you would have multiple cards. But there is one drawback of this sparkline feature. If you select to have your sparkline, so like this dynamically drawn little chart, then you cannot have the icon. So you cannot have this, for example, this dollar icon, because if you can have either one on the other, basically. If you go to images, then it will allow you to add an image, but either only the normal image, so the one from your computer, or the dynamically drawn one, so the image URL. So either one or the other, in the default setting at least. Okay, cool. We've reached the end of the live demo. So let's actually go back to the conclusions, because we have 5 minutes left. So let's see what the key takeaways are. Now this slide summarizes basically the whole session. So if you wish to take a screenshot, please feel free and use it. So let's summarize. First, the new card and button slicers, their biggest advantage is that they both offer a much greater degree of customizability and personalization over the old visuals, over the old card and slicer visuals. So if you want to personalize it a bit more, make it blend better into the color theme and the colors of your company or your client, and that wasn't possible before, well, now it's most likely possible with the new features. Second point, when should you use the new features over the old ones? Basically, every time now, unless someone is really committed in your organization, or you are, to the old design of the old slicer or card visuals. But really, to face it, you can create the same designs of that look like the old card and slicer visuals with the new visuals. So there is no reason to really stick to the old ones unless you're facing any bugs or something like that. 3.33, third key takeaway. The new card visual offers this great degree of optimization that can yield a better report performance and loading time if you consolidate the infographics into it. So let's go back to here, for example. If you are building infographics like this using individual elements, individual visual elements, you can now have them in one visual. It will be much faster to load for your user, and the user experience will be much better since it will be just faster. And obviously, if your report, your dashboard is already lagging because of a huge number of individual visual elements, then this is an ideal use case to go for this new card visual. I know it's possible to also code something like this in an HTML viewer visual, but that one is more customizable, but this one is much faster to do. So a bet for a bet. Fourth, it's an obvious point that both the new card and slicer visuals require some effort from your end and investment of time to customize them and personalize them. But of course, as with any Power BI visual, if you just copy and paste them somewhere else, you put in another category there. So instead of the year, you put a brand, you put product category. That's the whole design will stay the same. So you can reuse them, which is great. And 5, both features are still in preview mode, so there still might be some bugs and problems that you might be expecting. So just keep this in mind. I haven't faced any for 3 or 4 months now, but around 5 or 6 months ago, when I first touched these 2 new features, there was some bug in which I couldn't add the font size, something like that. But still, since these are preview features, keep in mind that there might be some bugs inside. Okay, and with that, I would like to thank you for this, for being here for the session. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them over the last minute, and enjoy the rest of the sessions during the Power BI Day today.